Hey everybody, Zeal Brothers here with another video. This one in response to the leaked reports that the Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And this is it's an issue that kind of has a lot of different facets to it. So let's just talk about the fact that we have suspicions that the Supreme Court will overturn Roe versus Wade. And when you talk about Roe versus Wade, what it essentially does is it tries to create a right that it really isn't a right. And one of the problems that a lot of people have when they talk about the abortion issue is oftentimes they don't talk about the facts, they just talk emotionally charged. And the problem with the abortion people is, number one, you're wrong on the law. There is no right to abortion in the law. And I've seen a lot of criticism from the left about Roe versus Wade being overturned and talking about how it upsets the rights of women and women have a right to abortion. And for there to be a right, it has to have some kind of responsibilities with it. And there is no right to abortion. Now, let's look even further, because what is a right? Ultimately, if you look at the framers' argument, a right is something that God has given to humankind, and governments are just if they recognize them, right? Some people think rights come from the government. That is not the case. Some people think rights come from the Constitution. That is not the case. The founders never thought that any government could give you a right or any constitution could give you a right. Rather, they were rights that were inherent to being a human being, and a good government will recognize those, and a bad government will not recognize those. So when you look at the right of abortion, there is no such right, because God has not given you such a right to kill another. But let's look at the second point, which is not legal, but it is moral. Abortion is immoral. And a lot of people have a problem with that argument because they want to make it, they want to go to these extremes. And the problem is, a lot of times when you argue with people, what they like to do is they like to go to this 1% or this 0.5% case, right? They like to go to this exception instead of arguing what is generally accepted to be true. And what you need to do when you make a plausible argument is you need to state what is generally true first and then deal with any exceptions after that, right? The argument has to be true on the majority first, then deal with the minority. I think that should be obvious. That's how anything works. You go to work, you have an established set of procedures. There may be exceptions, but the first thing you need to do is deal with the set of procedures that deal with the things you deal with every day, the common sense things. And when you talk about abortion, it is immoral because it is distinctly a human life that is being ended for selfish reasons. It is because of the convenience of the mother. And the problem that we have is in society today, one of the areas that we have that is terrible right now is women, right? And when you look at a lot of women out there, it is hard for people to talk about it. But the truth of the matter is, while men are bad, right now, the selfishness of women, it is something that is incredible to behold. And I would just break it down in a number of ways. Number one is this idea that men cannot have any expectations on a lady. Anytime a man criticizes a woman, that's frowned upon. Anytime a man talks bad about a lady, that's frowned upon. Anytime that a man says a lady does something wrong, she flips out. And what that points out to you is that there is this imbalance right now in the judgment of men versus the judgment of women. It's just true. And so it's something that we need to accept, that a lot of people will not want to deal with the abortion issue because they don't want to call out women who are doing things that are wrong. And when it comes to abortion, abortion is extremely selfish on the behalf of both women and men who engage in it. And what it does is it is the systematic murder of children that are inconvenient to you. So you will go about the actions that create a child, but you don't want to have the responsibility of dealing with that child, so you just get rid of that child. And when you look at it logically, there's really not much difference between aborting a child and having a child that is 3 months old and killing that child versus having a child that's 3 years old and killing that child. It's really not much of a logical difference, and it's hard for people to make the argument otherwise. Sometimes people will say the argument, hey, this child is dependent on the mother to live. And so the child needs the mother's permission to live. And while let's even accept that argument for a second, the same is true of a 1-month child. A 1-month-old cannot survive on his own. he will need his mother. In fact, his primary way of eating is off of his mother. And so when you deal with an infant, are you saying that that's okay to kill an infant? Are you saying that's okay to kill somebody who's disabled, who is dependent on someone else to keep them alive? Are you saying it's okay to kill somebody who needs CPR because they're dependent on you to breathe some kind of life back into them for them to live? And when you look at all these arguments, what you have is because it is inconvenient for this person to live, therefore we can kill them. Now, if you're making that argument in a political sense or an international sense, then maybe I could understand it. But even then it seems cold, right? It would seem cold for somebody to say, hey, man, the state of Egypt is inconvenient for us right now, so let's just take out their whole army. A lot of people will say, man, that's kind of an immoral act. But the same people will then turn around and justify somebody taking out a child just because that child's life is a big inconvenience to them. So it's immoral. But here's another thing. It is evil, and it is against Christianity. Now, I was reading an article, and in this article, it quoted a pro-abortion pastor. Now, I ain't never heard of such a thing. And if you think that you are a pro-abortion pastor, you are not qualified to be a pastor. Being a pro-abortion pastor is like being a Satanist Christian. It's like being, a child abuse supporting foster home. It's just something that doesn't go with what you're supposed to be doing, right? And so what we need to understand is it goes against Christianity. Why? Because Christianity has the argument that we are created, that we get our life at conception. Christianity has this idea that we are formed within our mother's womb distinctly, that we have a soul when we are distinctly human, that the life that we have is distinctly ours. The Bible even has this rule in the law, and it says if you wound a mother so that she cannot give birth and the baby dies, it says take a life for a life. In other words, the Bible viewed the life of the child inside the mother as a distinctly human being, just the same as science does now. I know a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that, but not only is abortion against religion, which was point number 3, but it's also against science. It is obvious when you look at the science and you examine what a child is, you examine what DNA is, you examine when a child actually starts breathing, when a heartbeat begins, that almost every single abortion that you could think of is a form of murder. So, abortion is wrong. But let's look at another side of the issue, and that is that this decision was leaked. How do we know about this decision? And this points out something about the left that a lot of people are not talking about. And that is this, that the left, the far left, is willing to stoop to any level to further their ends. And I think lots of Christians, you got to wake up to this, because a lot of Christians, they want to paint a middle line. They want to act like, oh, I don't want to say the left or the right is wrong because I want to just say, stand in the middle and not make a choice. That's cowardly. And the truth of the matter is, while there are some issues on the right, and I will be the first to call them out, it is the far left that is far more dangerous to Christianity. It is the far left that is trying to outlaw Christian thought. It is the far left that are trying to outlaw Christian conclusions. It is the far left that is trying to make it so you cannot say a man is a man and a woman is a woman. It is the far left that is trying to say you cannot disagree with certain sexual relationships. And so when we look at where danger comes from, it's coming more from the left than from the right. That is just obvious, and it should be indisputable, especially from a Christian perspective. But when you look at the fact that this was leaked, we have never had decisions like this leaked before. And the reason that we had this decision leaked is because somebody is trying to influence either the justices who have not made their decision formally yet, or the Congress. Both of these would be immoral ways of trying to pressure a decision. One, if you're trying to pressure the justices, that will be immoral because they're supposed to be making their decisions without the pressure. That's why they have lifetime appointments. They're not supposed to be influenced by the public. So that will be immoral. The second one would be leaking something that they're not supposed to know to Congress in order to influence Congress. Because if you look at the drumbeat online, they keep on saying this phrase: somebody needs to codify Roe. If you were to Google that phrase, you would see about 100 people quoting that phrase: codify Roe, codify Roe, codify Roe. Nobody needs to codify Roe, because Roe was an immoral and illegal decision. It was a bad decision. It was poorly reasoned, if you ever have read it. And this idea that you're going to do something illegal to get a political movement started is something that everybody needs to watch, because people on the left have no lines they will not cross. And we need to be especially careful of this. You need to watch those people on the left, because they are wild. They're the same people that burn down cities because they don't get their way. They're the same people that send out death threats and all that stuff. And people can laugh and say, oh, you know, people on the right do it too. It is far more prevalent on the left than it is on the right. And you can look at the news of the last 5 years and prove it to yourself. So like I said, no side of the aisle is perfect in my eyes. I will call out BS wherever I see it. But this Roe versus Wade decision has exposed a lot of people's immorality. And we need to watch for that. So hey, this the Zeal Brothers out here speaking the truth to the young, to the old, to the youth. And we're going to keep on speaking on these issues. I also want you guys to check out our videos on Wags the Warrior of Truth. As you can see, I'm sporting the flashy hat right here. This hat is killing the game. I want everybody to go out there and support Wags the Warrior of Truth comic book. It is very good, and you can see a lot of those videos on our page. So subscribe. Make sure you click the bell so you hear the notifications, and check us out.